I've been dying to ask you this question. You got out September 3rd, 2001. A week later, September 11th happens. The towers go down. What is the first thing that went through your head? If you have one piece of advice for the kid aspiring to be an SF operator.
Selection isn't an assessment of what you're actually doing.
I want to take a call, and
You take calls on your podcast? That's cool.
I take calls.
What's up, brother?
Keebler, you son of a bitch.
It was from an operation where they had killed this bad guy, and they took his leg.
It's official. We're up and running. This is episode 001. I want to personally welcome everyone to the Shawn Ryan Show. Our first guest today is Mike Glover. He's a badass operator, a former Green Beret. We've worked together, known each other for a long time. I asked him some really tough questions that I think you guys are really gonna like. If you're watching this on YouTube and you want to listen, please head over to iTunes, hit the subscribe button, give us a rating. We want to make this motherfucker go apeshit. All right, without further ado, welcome to the show, Mike Glover. All right, Mike, welcome to my show. How do you like Tennessee?
I love it, man. It's beautiful. Thanks for having me out here. It's amazing. I've never been here. Never. I don't think I've ever been to Tennessee. I've been to the border with North Carolina and Tennessee.
Doing some cross-border ops?
Cross-border ops
Right.
behind friendly lines.
Right.
But it's beautiful, man. I love it. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure, man. I've had a really good fucking time since you've been up here, and it's great catching up with you. You know, the last time I saw you, we were in Yemen and getting shot at. We didn't really get to know each other out there, and started listening to your podcast, and we kind of kept in touch a little bit, maybe once or twice a year, but we got a lot of shit in common, man. I mean, you showed up, and the first thing we did is go look for some treasures at the antique shops.
Yeah, I didn't realize how much we had in common. You know, you're obviously half Japanese, I'm half Korean, so we get the Asian thing in common. I'm also a big antiquer. I've always been. I don't know if isolationist is part of what we have in common, but I'm about off-grid living and just getting away from people. And yeah, man, it was Yemen, and you had that assassination attempt, and it was a pretty big deal, getting shot up, and we QRF'd you, and it was a good day. I mean, it was a good day that you didn't get hurt and you came back.
Good day to get compromised. But yeah, that was a weird trip. But we're out of that now, and you're here, and yeah, you know, we were talking about isolating ourselves, and I mean, I think a lot of us do that. One thing I also notice is how giving you are, and right now you got a toy drive going on, so for any of you guys out there that want to donate, Mike's got a toy drive. I want to bring this up now so I don't forget, but I think that's just really fucking cool that you do those kind of things, and you are constantly giving back, and that's cool, man.
We always try to give back any way we can. I mean, we've probably given in excess of $50,000 last year to charities, to
$50,000?
Mm-hmm. Charities to men and women who have died in the line of service, whether that's police, military, first responders. A lot of it we don't even advertise that we do it, but we leverage the community that we have and crowdsource from like-minded people who want to help people out. And yeah, I know you've done that before, but it's a huge thing for us. And every holiday season, we like to do the toys. It's the one instance, I'm not a big materialistic kind of person, but if a kid who's in a bad situation, which we all have seen that or experienced it ourselves, if that could bring a little joy during the holiday season, which is a tough time for a lot of families, then, so be it. We'll raise a whole bunch of toys and give them to less fortunate people.
That's awesome. Well, when's the deadline to get the toys to you?
Honestly, there is no deadline. I'll hand deliver them myself. If people want to donate toys, they could send them to our address. It's on fieldcraftsurvival.com, as long as it's before Christmas. Cool. And then after the fact, just stay tuned to the channels because we're always doing something.
Right on, man. Well, speaking of Christmas, what is the one thing you want this year more than anything?
It's the first time. I mean, it's not the first time, but it's solidified now. It's the first time where I'm good, man. I don't want anything.
You don't want anything?
I've got everything.
You have everything.
Look, some of my favorite things to do are the freest things to do.
Okay.
Picking up rocks. I rock hound, so if I see cool rocks, I pick them up and I put them on my shelf.
Well, you did steal a big bag of mushrooms from my property down there.
I harvest mushrooms, and I stole a bag of turkey tail mushrooms from your yard.
I hope that makes it through the airport.
I'm gonna try to fly with it.
Well,
we'll see. The only thing they could do is arrest me.
Well, speaking of Christmas, even though you don't want anything, I got you a little gift here.
Ooh, okay.
So, any guesses? Go ahead. What do you got?
So this is a box of Milk Duds.
Is it?
Is it?
Is it?
It's something. Man, this is a lot of weight. I don't know. Okay, now.
All
I'm
right,
taking
open it.
All right, here we go.
Open that motherfucker up.
Here we go. Is it gonna punch me in the face?
No.
All right.
It's not a dick in the box or anything.
Man, look at you.
Hey.
I should have guessed.
Just a little something for the ride home.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
This is 10 more pounds I don't need. That's gonna be on my ass. Oh, this is awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome. I saw you carry them for your EDC, so I figured I'd get you,
I do. I absolutely do.
a bigger pack for your...
Yeah. These will not be donated. These will be mine. I'll selfishly take these. Gummy bears and Milk Duds.
Right on. Well, let's just do a quick overview of how you grew up, and then we'll get into your military career a little bit, and then I really am excited to talk about Fieldcraft. But where did you grow up? What was your family life like? Do you have any brothers and sisters?
So I was born in a military installation in California, Fort Ord, California. My dad had already been in the military for a year or two, and I was born in a military family. My dad was in the Army, my uncle was in the Navy. I have a great-great-grandfather who was a general in the Civil War. It's always been part of our DNA. I mean, it's just...
You had a grandfather in the Civil War?
Yeah, a Confederate grandfather, General Hood.
No shit.
Yeah, he was a boss. He made general at the age of 37. He lost his leg in Gettysburg, lost his arm in another battle. He was a boss. He went to West Point. He was known as a battlefield general. Like, he was the guy that did a lot of ops. And he looks batshit crazy. If you see him online, he looks like a boss, but he had a pretty sad story. He eventually died, and then all of his kids were basically harvested out in the adoption system.
Holy shit!
But my family on my dad's side, the white side, all grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, and we grew up in the rural South. I mean, my family's from Georgia, and they all migrated, crossed the border into Florida. And, I grew up in Daytona Beach, Florida for the most part. and I say for the most part because I was all over the place. I lived my first 4 years in life in Germany where we were stationed. My mom and dad separated when I was about 4 or 5. She went to North Carolina. My dad went to Florida. And so I spent time between Florida and North Carolina with 2 separated parents, kind of just living life growing up. I had a good upbringing. We were poor as shit. I remember not even 1 year I couldn't even afford, my mom couldn't afford to buy me shoes.
Holy shit.
I wore flip-flops the entire school year. My mom didn't even have a car growing up. We walked everywhere. So, sad stories of, my life was hard. I walked to the grocery store and we had to walk miles to get groceries. And it's stereotypical in American society, but it was true. I mean, we just didn't have a lot. My dad was bouncing around from apartment complexes to trailers. I remember when I was 15 years old, laying in my bedroom in my mobile home and being able to touch all the walls with my arms and legs. That's how small it was.
Wow.
So yeah, didn't have much, but we were rich because we didn't feel like we were poor.
All love, huh?
All love, man. My dad's a real loving guy, and he tucked me in every night. He read me bedtime stories. He told me he loved me. He was empathetic. He was a real compassionate and humble person. And growing up with that was real impactful because I understood what emotional intelligence was. He was dumb when it came to women. He was a womanizer, made a lot of fucking mistakes like most men do. My mom was a disciplinary. She ruled with a kung fu grip. She used to beat my ass. And I needed that. I needed the balance of both to be able to be successful. And luckily for me, I just had good parents and a really decent upbringing. So yeah, lived that way until I eventually ran away when I was 16 years old. And I wrote my grandma a letter because I was living with her at the time.
Where did you run to?
Down the road.
Okay, I did that too.
Like a couple miles. But I actually lived in a motel for on and off for almost a year.
What kind of, was it like
It was a
shitty
shit
little
motel.
pay by the hour motel?
Basically.
But you weren't having any fun in there, were you?
It sucked. It was a little shit motel, and I thought I was living baller life because I was living on my own, but it sucked. I'll never forget, like I was leaving the motel to go to work, and it was too far to ride a bike because it was miles. It was like 12 miles away. And so I decided to start taking the bus, but I had to wake up like an hour early. And I was getting on the sidewalk to get on the bus stop, and this is just me being 16, living on my own, wearing my little get-up for the job I had, and a Jeep drove by full of like teenage kids, and they threw a Wendy's Flurry or whatever, the Frosty, and it hit me in the chest and exploded all over me.
Holy shit.
And I remember, like, I got hit with it, and I just continued to walk, and I just sat on the park bench, the bus stop bench, just waiting for the bus, like, holy fuck, man. People suck.
Yeah.
And it just was like, man, this is my life now. So I knew I had to do something different, and so I did. I joined the Army at the age of 17.
You joined the Army at the age of 17?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
No shit. Where did you enlist?
I enlisted in Jacksonville, Florida, in the infantry.
Did you have any, at 17 years old, who signed for you?
So my grandmother signed for me to go in the military because she was my legal
shit.
guardian. And
so did you have any guidance, or did you just, that's what you knew you wanted to do, and you just made it happen? You just went there, you didn't talk to anybody, it was just you and the recruiter, or did you have a mentor?
I didn't really have a mentor. I had some decent recruiters. They weren't the best, but I knew about the military. I played Army with my cousins growing up my entire life. Like, if you were to ask back then, even as kids, who was the most likely to go in the military, I mean, I slept with a Glock BB gun underneath my pillow. I planned complex raids and operations as a child. So I already knew. In fact, I made my dad a bet that I was going to go into Special Forces. I think I was 10 years old, where I was interested in the Navy. I was interested in Green Berets. And I asked him, obviously being biased, who was the best. And he said, Green Berets. And so I said, I want to be that. And I bet him. I actually bet him an MP5.
You bet him an MP5?
I said, if I get in, you're going to give me an MP5 SD. Because I was fascinated with guns. I read about guns and had magazines and books. And I always say, yeah, he still owes me an MP5 SD.
I was just going to ask, where
never
is
paid
it?
up. He'd have to sell his mobile home to get that.
Well, yeah, those are pretty, what are those, like 25 grand now?
At least.
Yeah. That's a good bet, though. An MP5, nice.
Solid.
So you still want one. You could have said that, and maybe it would have shown up for Christmas.
That would, see, yeah, if I can get him an MP5 SD, I've actually tried. I've reached out to a couple companies. I need an SD.
Maybe we could do a little barter here.
I don't even need the SD model. If you're listening to this, look, I don't need the tax stamp. I don't want the drama. Just get me the standard model.
Right on, man. And like the
MP5.
with the special selector switch.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah, with the Ziploc bag.
Would you rather have an MP5 or an MP7?
Honestly, because I'm more nostalgic and old school, I'll do the MP5.
All right.
Like MP7s don't impress me. I mean, it looks cool because you guys made it look cool, but outside of that, I've shot them and used them in combat, and they're not that exciting.
You have used those in combat?
Yeah, I've carried an MP5.
You don't like it?
Or I've carried MP7. I've never killed a bad guy with one. I carried it on like PSD kind of stuff because they conceal a lot better, obviously, than an M4. But the units and special operations units that I've been in, guys don't typically run them.
No shit. I've heard guys rave about them.
Yeah, the Navy's big about them. I mean, entire organizations and troops are using those, and I'm sure that's for a good reason.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that would have been the perfect weapon for what me and you were doing together.
100%.
But a lot better than what we were using.
100%. I agree with that. I was wondering why we didn't have those available.
And it is pretty fucking cool looking.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
That's half of it, right? But all right, so 17, join the military, go to infantry, and how was that? Was it everything you had hoped and dreamed?
It's funny because I remember I went to Fort Benning, Georgia, infantry basic training, and I joined with an 11 X-ray option 40 Ranger contract, which means that in basic training I would be plucked after AIT, Advanced Individual Training, and then I would go to Ranger Regiment. And so that was the plan. Yeah, and the option 40 contract guarantees you a Ranger slot. Like the Ranger instructors are going to come pick you up and you're going to go to Ranger Battalion. I didn't think basic training was hard. I thought it was easy. As a 17-year-old with a myriad of life experiences that were a little bit more difficult than most, it wasn't hard for me. I mean, I remember distinctly, because I was a squad leader in basic training, either threatening or punching or like checking dudes, grown men who were crying, who wanted to kill themselves, who wanted to leave, get back to their girlfriends or their wives, and thinking to myself, like, holy crap, man. Yeah. This is like, at the time, 15 weeks of your life, and you guys can't suck it up to do a job, to get trained up in the military. And so I band together with a whole bunch of dudes that were just solid dudes that eventually went into special operations for the most part. But what was unfortunate is I got selected to be 11 Hotel.
What is an 11 Hotel?
It's like, basically it's an infantryman who drives, who rolls in a Humvee. Okay. So you learn heavy weapons like 50 cal, the TOW missile system, and you're considered anti-tank. And I actually liked it because I was like, oh man, I don't have to walk. I mean, I can have, like, I'm a mobility expert because I learned the GMV or the Humvee at the time. And I thought it was real cool, except that when they selected us, they did it randomly. I mean, they said, hey, you guys are Bravos, which is just basic infantry. You guys are Charlies, which is mortarmen. And you guys are Hotels, which is heavy weapons. And then when the recruiter or the ranger instructors came to pick us up, I was flabbergasted. I was just like, what the fuck's going on? Like, why am I not getting picked up? And they said, well, there's no 11 hotels in Ranger Regiment, which I was like, okay, that's not my problem. Well, it was my problem. And so I didn't get to go to Ranger Regiment like I was supposed to. I still have the contract, option 11 X-ray, option 40. And that was just their way of downsizing. I mean, I'm assuming incentivizing people, and then at basic training, basically fucking them. And they told me I couldn't go, and I didn't have any other options.
Shit.
So I picked up a phone and called my uncle at the time, who was a sergeant major in the infantry, and said, hey, I don't know what's going on, but this has happened. And within, I would say 48 hours, they changed my MOS to 11 Bravo in basic training.
Which is?
Basic infantryman.
Okay.
And from 11 Hotel, which is now my primary, and my secondary is 11 Hotel. And they said, we're going to send you to a unit called the Old Guard, the 3rd Infantry Regiment. And when you get there, you're going to put a 4187 to go to Ranger Regiment. I didn't even know what the hell the Old Guard was, the 3rd Infantry Regiment. I had no idea. Went and saw the recruiter. A civilian came in and crossed out 11 Hotel, wrote 11 Bravo, put his initials, and I was like, damn, it's that easy. And then I went and in process the 3rd Infantry Regiment in Fort Myer, Virginia.
I mean, that had to be just fucking gut-wrenching to, I mean, your dream was to become a ranger at that time, correct? Mm-hmm. And they just fucking yanked it right out from underneath you.
Yeah.
And, I mean, how long, did you mope around about it, or did you say, fuck it, this is my new direction and I'm gonna kick its ass?
So I knew I had a timeline where 4187 back in the day was the way in which you submitted paperwork to transfer units. And it worked typically. It didn't work for me, long story short. But I knew when I got there as an E1 that I had to, number one, my uncle had been in the Old Guard. He had been a tomb guard at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier. So I had big shoes to fill. And so when I showed up, I was all about the grind, man. I didn't show up day one in the military to hang out with chicks, to get drunk at bars, and to fuck off. My entire objective was to go in special operations, and I didn't give a fuck about anything else. So when I showed up, I went to work. I immediately, as a private, got my expert infantry badge, which is pretty rare as a PV1. In fact, when I tried out to get my expert infantry badge, me and my platoon leader were the only ones in my platoon that got our expert infantry badges, which is basically a test, a Common Core task, and they assess you, and then you do a ruck march and all this stuff. When I got back from that, I went to airborne school.
What year is this roughly?
97.
Okay.
When I got back from that, I went to Ranger school. Everybody's like, you're going to Ranger school? I was like, fuck yeah, I'm going to Ranger school. I just distinctly remember being different than everybody else I was around. Friday night, dudes were shotgunning Coors Lights in the barracks. I was putting on a rucksack to go out. And that's no exaggeration. And I didn't falter. I don't think I ever once in that unit drank at all.
No shit. So you're about, what, 18 at this time?
18, yeah.
And you didn't give in to any of the pressure?
None. And
wow.
they gave me a hard time, and I was like, fuck you, I'm not interested.
That's impressive.
So when they were going out getting wasted, they would see me rucking across the Potomac River, going to Georgetown, carrying a rucksack. And I went to Ranger school as an 18-year-old, graduated as a 19-year-old, went straight through, no issues. Got back, and then I assessed, it's a selection process, to become a guard at the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, which to this day is the hardest thing that I've ever done. That training to become a tomb guard took me 9 months.
Holy shit.
To earn my tomb identification badge, which I have. And I spent the rest of that time guarding the Tomb of the Unknowns, which is great because I didn't have to fucking deal with people or dumbasses. I kind of got to do my own thing. And yeah, I finished up my infantry time as a tomb guard trainer. I trained tomb guards for a year.
No shit.
Yep.
So, so you became obviously, the best at that. I find that impressive that your primary focus was to get into special operations, yet you still took that job, sounds like extremely seriously, as, I mean, it's a fucking honor to, even see that. But, I mean, that's doing something that you weren't set on doing and kicking its ass. I mean, that is pretty fucking commendable.
Yeah, I didn't have a choice in it. So the path, the Army's like that. It's a big institution. So you don't have a lot of choice or a lot of opportunity. And so my idea was, if I, given what I was given, I have a choice in which to be successful and at that time be all I could be in the Army. So I chose that.
Wow. So moving forward.
Well, moving forward, I actually had a break in service and decided to get the fuck out.
What day did you get out?
September 3rd of 2001.
I've been dying to ask you this question. You got out September 3rd, 2001. A week later, September 11th happens. The towers go down. What is the first thing that went through your head, knowing, your primary mission was, or your primary goal was to become a Green Beret in special operations, kicking fucking doors in, going to combat, that whole lifestyle, and then you immediately know we're at war.
Yeah, it was...
and you're not in it.
The biggest kick in the balls that I've ever had, because, I mean, backing up a little bit, I had the option to re-enlist. Obviously, I was on retention's radar for like, hey, this guy's an airborne ranger qualified dude. He's an E5. I made sergeant when I was 20 years old. And so I was a team leader in the infantry, had good NCOERs. And so it's like, hey, man, this guy's a good guy we want to keep in the military. But I told them that I want sniper school and I want Halo school en route to 18th Airborne Corps LRS, or Long Range Reconnaissance, or Ranger Battalion. And I was adamant about that. I actually went into a Sergeant Major's office, who was the military district of Washington, so he's a command sergeant major. He knew my uncle, and he said, Mike, what can I give you to stay in? I said, these are the things that I want. And he goes, which I found out later is true, Halo or free fall school is not a re-enlistment option. And it's not. Back then, you didn't have a lot of incentive for staying in, so they used to give you schools to stay in. Mm-hmm. And I said, Sergeant Major, well, we can make it an option, right? Because that's what I want. He's like, Mike, I can't do that for you. I mean, I'll call and I'll try, and he did, but it's not an option. So a CSM even can't make it an option. And so I said, okay, I gave the options on the table, and they decided not to facilitate what I wanted as a dream. And so I decided to get out. I had a buddy who re-enlisted with me that I went to Ranger School with, or re-enlisted without me, and he went to 3rd Ranger Battalion. He jumped into Afghanistan on October 19th, 2001.
Son of a bitch.
And so the moment it happened, I was actually in college, and I had gotten out of the military, obviously, but I had transitioned into the National Guard component.
Okay.
So I'm sitting in a chow hall at Fayetteville Technical Community College, getting my associate's degree so I could further my education, and saw the events happen. I did some crazy shit, man. I immediately started making phone calls. I went home. I packed a duffel bag of my equipment. I threw my battle dress uniforms, my camo uniforms, in the washer and then dried them, and was making calls like, what are we doing here? What's happening? And I was, at the time, I was in 30th Heavy Armor Separate Brigade, and I was in the Scout Platoon, and I was a team leader. So I had a little minuscule position that could affect something. but I knew we were going to war. So I had a choice to make, which was real easy, which was I'm going back in the fucking military.
Yeah.
So on September 12th, like 09 in the morning, I'm making phone calls to get back in.
I mean, that had to be like at the exact same time that's happening, two completely separate emotions. One, tragedy. We'd just been attacked and a lot of people died. On the other hand, what comes after, and everything you've ever wanted to do since you said you were 10 years old becomes a reality, and you're not there. I mean, was one more overpowering than the other?
Yeah, it was. I mean, I felt for the people, obviously, but I knew that I was in a unique position to make a difference in the fight, because I was an NCO. I mean, I was a non-commissioned officer, and I knew that there was an opportunity for me to get in the military and fight and get some vengeance, and that's what I wanted to do. I joined the Army to fight. The reason I got out, because there was no fight to be had. If there was a war, if there was something going on, I would have been in it.
Yeah.
I think something important to note is the biological instinct in men, most men, the men I associate with, to fight. I mean, it's to fight each other in training, because that's what we do as kids. We fight, and we grow up in those environments where we're displaying our masculinity, and there's a whole bunch of psychological and physiological things that are associated with that. And I don't think we grow out of that. We grow up and we want to fight and defend. That's what men do. And so it definitely was part of my character and my DNA. And I don't think it was fake. I think it was something very real. And I wanted to fight, so I had to go back in.
How'd you get back in?
It was a battle, because the Army didn't really know how to handle a whole bunch of dudes who were prior service guys that wanted to go back in.
Was there a lot of guys that wanted to come back?
There was a lot of guys. During that time period, a lot of people who were prior service who had gotten out, I mean, even older guys who had gotten out, wanted to come back in and serve. So I had to go through the whole process again, which was...
Holy shit.
I had to go through MEPS, as an E5, going back through MEPS, the whole duck walk thing, all that stuff. I had to go back through all that to get back in. And they had a program which is kind of similar to what's called 18 X-ray now, where you can come in off the streets and try out for selection. And if you make it, they'll send you to special forces training. And if you don't, you simply just go back to your sister unit, or if you don't have a unit, whatever your job is, they'll find a job for you in that position.
Now, how old are you at this point?
At this point, I'm 21 years old.
You're 21 years old.
Yeah.
You just saw the towers come down.
Yep.
And the only thing on your mind is, I got to fucking get back in there.
Yep.
No shit. I mean,
yeah.
Wow. That's a lot of courage.
I was young.
Yeah. That's a
young.
lot of courage.
Yeah.
So you got back in.
Yep, I got back in and got the opportunity to go to selection, and I did that in 2002, and I was successful. And
where were you at in the mix? Would you say you were top of the class, middle?
I was probably about middle of the class, which is where I wanted to be. I'd always been told and grew up, obviously going to Ranger school, where I didn't want to be the spotlight ranger.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to be the gray man.
Yeah. And
so I wanted to be somewhere in the middle, not standing out for the wrong reasons or even necessarily the right reasons. I just wanted to be middle of the pack. I'm a really good rucker. I can carry a ruck really well. I remember even intentionally slowing down on rucks just so I wasn't advanced as the first person. Running, different story. With my size, I'm not the best runner, but I'm a decent runner, probably middle of the pack. And so when I got selected, I had confidence that I was probably going to get selected. I didn't prepare. I prepared as much as I could, but my feet were hammered dog shit. I mean, my feet were just jacked up.
What is there anything about, so selection is what you have to go through to become an SF guy and a Green Beret, for those of you that don't know. But was there one thing that you just really dreaded about selection? Like, for example, when I went to Buds, the first thing that I was really worried about was the 50-meter underwater swim. I didn't know if I could make it, and I was going to pass out trying, but that was the first hurdle that I was like, shit, man, I hope I make this. Was there a specific event that you knew about in selection that you were dreading?
Yeah, it's weird, but I was actually dreading the obstacle course, the Nasty Nick.
No shit.
Yeah, I just, you know what? I had an aversion to heights when I first went into the military, and what I recognized in a latter time was I wasn't scared of heights. I just didn't have confidence in my physical ability. So when I developed my physical ability to push and pull my body weight, I had confidence going over an obstacle. So it was less about heights and more about my abilities to carry my own weight. So if I'm carrying I'm climbing a 40-foot tower or obstacle course, then I would have confidence because I knew I could secure myself or, not shake and potentially go to muscle failure and fall. So I kept thinking about that. I remember thinking about that. But then when I did it, it's called the Nasty Nick, which is named after Colonel Nick Rowe, a Vietnam era veteran who started a lot of things at Camp McCall at the training facility. I didn't have a hard time. I got through it. It was a lot easier than I thought it'd be. My feet, again, were torn up, and I had to suck it up. But all in all, it was a fairly decent experience.
One piece of advice. I mean, I know you get a ton of DMs. If you have one piece of advice for the kid aspiring to be an SF operator, what would it be? One piece.
One piece would be selection isn't an assessment of what you're actually doing. It's an assessment of what you did prior to doing what you're doing. Meaning, if you show up and you do a 12-miler and your feet fall apart, well, your feet fall apart. But it's because you didn't prepare 3 months or 6 months prior and condition yourself. So the only thing they're doing is assessing you. It's kind of like us for contracting, where they're just assessing your resume. They're not training you. So show up prepared and ready to assess. Not show up and have some expectation that you're going to get trained and build up to it. You better be ready to perform.
That's solid advice. I'd say the exact same thing. So you graduate selection. Where do you go next?
So immediately we go straight into the qualification course and start training, and they identify what our MOS or job specialty is going to be, and they make me a 18 Bravo, which is a Special Forces weapons guy. Weapons sergeant is the title, which is an expert in weapons. So that's the pipeline that I started, which, small unit tactics, culmination in Robin Sage, SEER school, high risk, language school, unconventional warfare training, the list goes on.
What was your favorite, I don't even know what the hell to call it, genre?
Phase, yeah. My favorite phase or genre was unconventional warfare. I mean, unconventional warfare, I didn't know how they were going to teach us unconventional warfare, but when they taught us, and then we went into Robin Sage, which is a pretty famous, or known at least, field training exercise where you simulate and build an auxiliary underground network of guerrilla fighters, train with them, and then operate with them. It was super interesting, man. I mean, to jump into behind enemy lines into this town and interact with chicken farmers and gas station clerks was pretty awesome.
This is what fascinates me about the Green Berets, is that you guys can go in such small teams and create an entire fucking army. And and do it so efficiently. And, when in Iraq, let's fast forward just a little bit for a second. In Iraq, when I was with the SEAL teams, we had to have for the most part, almost every op we did, we had to have an Iraqi face. And the mission became FID, which is, training our counterparts. We had no fucking clue what the hell we were doing. We're SEALs, we're assaulters, and we can't even take care of 3 guys.
Yeah.
The correct way, because we've never been shown how. It wasn't our mission. And then you guys are out there, and it's the opposite. There might be 3 of you in a whole army of people. And how do you even fucking start? How do you recruit? How do you start that? How do you gain the confidence and be able to trust a local national?
Yeah, it's a process for sure. I mean, there's a deliberate process behind it. It's never done like willy-nilly. You go in there and you have a plan on building rapport, assessing, recruiting, vetting. And that process is pretty complex. It involves biometrics, it involves genealogy, it involves tests and evaluations, psychological evaluations. It's a pretty drawn out process. And yeah, it was.
Sorry, is there like a specific profile you're looking to start with, or?
No, for sure. It's mission dependent, right? Because one mission, if it's a 1208 and you're looking for counterterrorism guys who are kicking in doors and shooting bad guys in the face, is different than if you're looking for, assessing and recruiting patrol officers who are going to be interacting with the local populace. They're not going to be assaulters. So there is a tactic behind it, and then they teach us those tactics. And when we go into, it's super interesting because when you go into Robin Sage, they hire OP4 that are military cadets, West Pointers, like all these young, impressionable minds that want to be you. And then you have to start them from scratch. They don't have a big background in it. You have to get them online. You have to build rapport. You have to break bread. It's super interesting, man. What a lot of people don't realize, which I didn't realize until I was in, is foreign internal defense, or even counterterrorism foreign internal defense, which is FID, is not just a training mission, but a means to access and placement to that environment. So before the Vietnam War started, we were in Vietnam, Green Berets were training the Vietnamese. We exfilled Ho Chi Minh and trained that guy before he went in, obviously, took over. So it is an opportunity for us to do other things. And now that bilateral mission, which is you and a host nation force, is how you conduct operations. Because now you can't do it without it. Because you can go in there as a unilateral package, and if you don't have a strategy behind that, you're going to go in, kick a dude's door in, kill a bunch of bad guys, displace the environment, and cause a whole bunch of issues. You have to have some host nation force to be able to, strategically win that victory.
Okay. I want to touch more on this, but we'll wait until your first deployment. So back to selection.
Yeah.
Your favorite thing was Robin Sage. So how long is selection, and did you finish it without any hiccups?
Yeah, so selection is obviously for SFAS, Special Forces Assessment, and selection is the first thing. And then you go into the pipeline, which is known as the Q course or the qualification course, and that includes all the different phases. And I didn't have a hard time with anything. I without sounding egotistical about it, I just got through it.
No shit. First time every time?
First time every time. I didn't have any issues. The hardest thing for me was learning a foreign language. And I learned French. It took me four months to parlez-vous français, or whatever, how you ever say it. It was hard because I knew how to speak, or I knew how to read and write Korean, which is completely different, obviously, than French. Different backgrounds and bases. But yeah, that was difficult for me to be doing patrolling and small unit tactics and all this high-speed stuff, and then sit in a classroom for 4 months and learn a foreign language. That was the hardest part, but I got through that as well.
So you already knew Korean, but they send you to learn French.
I was a French-speaking Asian dude that deployed to the Middle East for the most of my career.
A really good-looking Asian dude.
Oh, thanks, man. I appreciate it. So are you.
I like my cabin and like 3 people.
I know. That's awesome. I know.
But, all right, so you go, where did you, after the Q course, where did you go?
It's a cool little story, but when I joined, when I went into SF, they give you orders based off a paragraph in line, which is just a way in which you identify what group or what battalion. They're basically it's basically a number that assigns you to a paragraph in line that specifically points you to a direction of a unit. And I knew I was going to 3rd Special Forces Group, which is the group that I wanted to go to because they were the group that was going to war. And it was right down the road from my training. I went into that group and started looking at battalions. At the time, 3 battalions, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd Battalion. I wanted to know who was the best battalion. I went into 1st Battalion, kind of poked my head in, looked at their little display cases and stuff, went over to the 3rd Battalion, did the same, and then I went into 2nd Battalion. And 2nd Battalion's motto at the time, I think it's still the motto, was "We do bad things to bad people."
Nice.
And it had the Harley Davidson outlined kind of thing with "We do bad things to bad people, bush hogs, 2nd Battalion." And I walked in there, and in a trophy case, they had this leg. It was a wooden leg sitting in the display case with a shoe on it. And I thought it was a guy's leg that had served in the unit. And I got closer, and it was like it was a peg leg, basically. I was like, whoa, that's weird. And next to it was like a 5x7 picture of a terrorist laying a pile of blood with a whole bunch of special operations guys standing around him.
Holy shit.
And it was from an operation where they had killed this bad guy, and they took his leg. And then they put the leg on display from this bad guy because he had been known as like One Leg Willie or whatever the hell his name was. HVT, Omar One Leg Willie. So they took his leg and they put it in display in the foyer of the battalion. And I said to myself, this is the battalion I need to be in. I knocked on the battalion sergeant major's door and I said, "Sergeant Major, my name is Staff Sergeant Mike Glover. I want to be in your unit. I want to serve and go to war with you guys." And if you know Special Forces, and maybe this is part of you guys too, if you want something done, you have to go out and get it. So me asking him to serve in his battalion, he said, "Why? What would make me want to have you serve in my battalion?" And I told him I was high speed, I was motivated, I wanted to go kill bad guys. He's like, "That's good enough." Shook my hand, handed me over to his personnel person, gave me a pointed subject and paragraph in line to go straight to his battalion. I got assigned to Charlie Company, which was going to war soon, immediately in process, and went straight to war.
That takes a lot of balls to knock on the door as a fucking new guy and say, "Hey, I want in. I want to go with you." I mean, as a leader, if I had that happen to me, I probably would have that alone would have been enough and be like, I know how much fucking balls it takes to come and pound on this fucking door and walk past my wooden leg that I took off that guy.
Yeah.
And you got what you wanted. That's fucking awesome. So were the boys pretty accepting when you showed up?
They were. I mean, they knew we were going to war soon, so they didn't have a lot of time to fuck with me. You know, Special Forces, if you show weakness on a detachment, if you are fucked up, if you're running your mouth, if you're saying dumb shit, there is a likelihood that you potentially are going to get messed with. I came in hard charging, squared away, kept my mouth shut. I knew the game.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I played that game as a Tomb Guard candidate for 9 months. Keep your fucking mouth shut, do your job, go home, repeat. So when I got to the team, I didn't have a hard time integrating, and nobody really fucked with me because they knew I wasn't a shitbag. I was there to work.
Were you drinking at that time?
No.
You're still straight-laced.
I never drank alcohol, ate sugar for the most part, or ate like shit my entire 20s. Never.
Wow.
Never.
Now, a lot of teams would probably actually frown upon that.
They did. I mean, some guys did, and I didn't care. I was raised this way with my mom, where I don't care about what the fuck you think about me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just trying to do me.
Yeah.
I'm more concerned with bettering myself than what your perception of me is. And I knew there was a right answer and a wrong answer. And for me, being in special operations, the right answer was conditioning my mind, my body, and trying to be the best I could. I thought alcohol was a liability, and it still is. I've seen it destroy teams. I've seen it destroy relationships. It's fucked up a lot of people. My mom, my family had their own issues with booze in some ways. So I didn't want anything to fucking do with it.
Wow. I mean, it's almost part of the culture in a unit like that. And as a young new guy, what are you, maybe 22, 23 at this time?
Yeah, at the time, after the Q course, because it was 2 years, I was damn near 25.
Showing up to a team who's already been to war and back, they invite you to go have a beer with them and welcome you to the team, and you say, I don't drink. I mean, that's hard to do. That's real hard to do.
Well, it wasn't for religious reasons. It wasn't for an ideology. It was because I was always training to do something. Mm-hmm. So physically, I was always in some prep phase. So they would ask me, why aren't you drinking? Well, because I'm running tomorrow morning, or I'm doing a ruck tomorrow morning. What do you mean you're rucking? We're at war. We're in Afghanistan. You're going to ruck? Like, yes, because I'm, again, taking my life that I had prepared my entire life for, basically, seriously.
Yeah.
And that bugged a lot of people, man. I got a lot of hate for it, but you want to be an alcoholic, you want to drink alcohol and be a fuck up, go fuck yourself. I'll be here rucking and taking care of my body and myself. And yeah, now I drink occasionally. I won't drink more than a couple beers. That's my limit.
Yeah.
Because I just don't like alcohol, but I like the social interaction. I like the taste of an IPA, but it's not something that I need. And it's definitely not something that I used when I was in the military.
You show up to third group, and how long are you there before deployment?
2 weeks.
2 weeks.
I'm there 2 weeks before we deployed.
So you didn't even have fucking time to get to know the team before you're in it with them?
I barely got my issue of equipment before we ripped out and headed to war.
Wow, and the team didn't even really have time to see if you were a good fit.
They didn't at all.
Holy shit.
Yeah, it was, and on top of that, the senior, because we operate in twos on a detachment, there's another 18 Bravo who's going to be my senior. He even got hurt or injured, so he couldn't deploy. So I was going to be the Bravo, which is a big responsibility in a fire base in Afghanistan.
You slide into the number one slot as a new guy.
Yeah. I'm in charge of base security, base defense, tactics, weapons, and we were going to war.
You're going on your first deployment.
Yeah, my guys had already ripped out, and they had already sent the PDSS, the pre-deployment site survey guys, and so they were just turning and burning, coming back, picking up the main body. So when I got there, it was a rush to get everything packed. Guys didn't want to be in the team room because they want to spend it with family. And then when I hit the ground, I was running. We immediately deployed to Afghanistan.
How many guys are on your team, roughly?
Well, I think at that time, maybe 10.
10 dudes.
Yeah, most attachments are light by nature of guys coming and going. And like I said, my 18 Bravo senior was in surgery, so he had to get his surgery, recover, and so we deployed that year to Afghanistan with a little bit of a light package.
What year?
This was '05, early '05.
So that's a hot year.
Yeah.
Now, are you running indige?
Yeah, part of the job is running indige. I mean, when I reported as an 18 Bravo, I was in charge of about 144 Afghan commandos.
Holy shit! So there are 10 guys. There's 10 SF guys
Yep.
running a 144-man army
Yeah, and basically I was the commander of them, so I was in charge of all of them
as a new guy.
as a new guy.
Holy shit!
Yeah, I'll never forget. He said, "Hey, your guys are formed up, waiting on you." Hey, waiting on me? Yeah, you're the 18 Bravo. Get up there and be their commander, because everybody else had other stuff to worry about. You know, I mean, the 18 Charlies had to run the fire base, which is a full-time job of the base security and the actual physical structure, the generators, the water system, everything. The commo, base defense. The commo guys are
What are your
integrated.
living conditions like?
Shit. I mean,
Tents,
living on a
connexes?
cot, surrounded by stacked sandbags in a concrete-ish, just mud hut
Okay,
on the second floor of a little structure.
so you're way the fuck out there, like at your own fire base. There's no PX.
Nothing.
There's no chow hall.
Nothing.
None of that shit. Are you eating local food?
A lot of the time we were, or Mermite or MRE. I mean, we were the furthest northern fire base on the border with Pakistan, and we had really not a lot of support. I mean, the closest support was JBAD, which was still hours away. I mean, if something went bad.
So how trained up? You show up in country. You're now the commander of 144 Afghan force. How well are they trained? Did you guys? Was there like a changeover from another team, or are you starting from scratch?
No, some of them were trained up by prior ODAs. I think first group was there before us. Before that, there was another third group team. And so they had a little bit of training, but that's, I mean, man, when you're talking about Afghans in a rural province of Afghanistan that have no education, have no aptitude, don't know how to read, write, yeah, I mean, it's all relative.
I mean, if there's one thing they're good at, it's jumping jacks.
It's jumping jacks and climbing mountains. Climbing mountains in flip-flops and jumping jacks, that's their forte.
You've seen that video, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But so they're pretty green. So you take over, and I'm getting a little ahead of myself, but I'm assuming the first thing you want to do is figure out what they're actually capable of doing.
Yeah, you have to, no matter what the condition or the situation, when you come into a new fire base or fall into new indige, you gotta vet them. You gotta put them through some kind of process to be able to see what their current capability is. We did that. It wasn't much, so we started from scratch.
Wow.
I mean, we were doing small unit tactics every single day. I was doing small unit tactics with them every single day that we weren't operating. And this would be the force. Not only, this is before Afghan commando units, Afghan border police, Afghan national police. This is before all that. So they didn't have a job. Their job for us they were Afghan commandos working for special forces guys. We paid them directly cash. So these were our first line of defense and QRF if anything went wrong.
So you show up in country, you got to get to know these guys, you got to train them, you got to figure out what their capabilities are, you got to improve those. How long do you have before boots on the ground, first operation?
Well, I mean, again, that's relative as well, because when you infill into a remote fire base, the one we were at in the middle of nowhere was surrounded by high ground. It was just a couple Americans in the middle of the Wild West. Mm-hmm. So we were getting rocketed. We were getting reports of attacks and all these things that were happening. So we were in it. We were in the thick of it already. But we didn't have any time. It was immediate. I think we went on an op 2 days, 3 days after we hit the ground. Immediately went and did a link up with one of the, Afghan, seniors or Afghan elders in a village. And that's a movement to contact. I mean, you're just rolling, hoping you're not going to get blown up, hoping you're not going to get in a tick with the guys that you haven't vetted yet.
Holy shit. Yeah. We're talking 2 fucking days.
2 days.
And you're out the door with them on a movement.
Yeah. We had no choice.
How did that go?
It went uneventful. We had activity, but nothing significant happened, luckily for us. And we just started building more rapport with them, vetting them, training them, and it improved our situation over time.
So you're out, you meet the village elder, you come back, you debrief. Are you happy with what you've just been handed with the 144 guys, or are you going, holy shit, we have got a lot of work to do?
No, I will say, here's just a little bit of forward history on the guys that I trained. Those same guys that I trained had worked with special operations, including Special Missions Unit from the Navy.
Okay.
Prior to working with us. So there were some good dudes. And when I left that fire base, a guy by the name of Rob Miller ripped into that fire base and was with those guys as an 18 Bravo from 3rd Special Forces Group when he was killed and earned the Medal of Honor, posthumously, of course. And those men, those Afghans that were with him, were the Afghans that I trained that were trained prior. And so they were squared away. I mean, they had heart. They were disciplined. They wanted it, man.
You're impressed with them.
Yeah, I was impressed. A good example was they instinctively knew when or if there was a potential significant act going to happen, called SIG Act. And they would immediately get to the high ground, and they were good about displacing themselves and then talking to the local community, because you have to understand that these people lived in that same community. So they knew everybody around them, and they didn't want to be the guy that failed their mission and got an American killed. So they had buy-in. So yeah, I was impressed with them. We had a lot of work to do, obviously, but they had a good base, and all the guys in Nuristan province that I operated with that were Afghan, in the village of Naray and Asadabad and Barakout, all great men.
How long did you spend with this team?
So that particular trip was 9 months in Afghanistan, and that team, I spent a year and some change with them.
I mean, 9 months is a long time to get to know somebody. I mean,
yeah.
People get married in less time less time than that. Did you develop more than a professional relationship with them, or was it always just you're the commander and they're the Jundies, or they're your guys? Did you get close? Did you keep in touch?
Yeah, I didn't keep in touch with a lot of them because I knew we were going to leave and it would be difficult to retain that. I tried to get close to them, but I knew there was a line. Mm-hmm. What I didn't want is to compromise the mission or the rapport building from another detachment that came in there, because you know how it works. The button gets reset every time a detachment comes through there. People try to reinvent the wheel. And I heard years later them asking about me when I was coming back, which is unfortunate because we should have went back. We should have had continuity and stayed with those specific, Afghanis for a longer period of time, because I think that's how ultimately you win, is when you have men that you build these relationships with and they're more loyal to you because you've built the rapport that's necessary.
I mean, it's unfortunate, but it's also got to be that's got to feel pretty fucking cool that they're still asking about you years later after several teams have come in and left. You must have made a hell of an impression on those guys.
Yeah, I wanted I'm a kind of guy where I'm not afraid to build rapport. I smoked cigarettes in Afghanistan with them. I hated it, but I knew that was part of their culture. I drank tea with them and smoked cigarettes, sitting on mats like a bunch of schoolgirls talking about, politics and the military and their families, like Afghan men do. I mean, that's what they do. So I socialized with them. I hung out with them. I did a lot of laughing and joking with them. But I knew the line because I still wanted them to respect me as a commander. So when I asked them to potentially sacrifice their life because they had an assault a bunker or do something that might take their life, I wanted them to do it. And so I kind of knew the psychology of it. I was just big into that. So I had my limits with them. But yeah, they're the greatest. I mean, partnered forces that I've worked with in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, etc. I've met some really good people.
Did you have an engagement other than base defense, or like getting rocketed or the base getting attacked? Did you have any engagements outside of the fire base?
We had a few
with them.
Yeah, we had a few significant events happen. We got in a little tick in the Cocha Valley, little gunfight. We brought in A-10s. We brought in the Marines. We lost MH-47. It was shot down, or not shot down. It was crashed down. It had a catastrophic failure and crashed. So whatever, $100 million helicopter, MH-47. The battalion commander for 160th was on that bird. So it was a big operation. And so yeah, we didn't get in engagements. Most of our actions, most of our activity was in the fire base, getting shot at, getting rocketed, and then responding to those rockets and responding to those attacks.
How was, because base engagements are a hell of a lot different than outside of it when you're on a mission. Yeah. A lot, base defense is usually it's pretty locked down to a T and everybody knows exactly what they're doing. It's when everybody has to find cover and fucking communicate. And we don't have to go into details on that, but when you got back, were you impressed with how they performed? And it's always a shit show, when you get contacted outside of the base. So were you impressed with their performance?
Yeah, I didn't have a problem with my guys' performances. They did well, typically all the time. Operating through language barriers, that's another story. The lulls in time. There was a whole bunch of logistical things also. My guys didn't run radios. We run ICOM radios because local traffic, we couldn't give out 100 embidder radios during an op
with crypto
and everything else. So there were challenges. We did a lot of basic 7-8 small unit tactics in order to accomplish a lot of objectives, using flares, using smoke.
No shit.
Using
so you're
hand and
using
arm
fucking
signals.
Vietnam era tactics.
Yeah, we were big on that. That's how we did most of our stuff. I did most of my commanding and controlling of my indige via hand and arm signals.
No shit.
And we had SOPs for smoke, for shift and lift fire, all that kind of stuff. So it was back to Vietnam. It was back to basics.
Wow. What are these guys carrying? Do they have nods? Do they have helmets?
At this time in the war, no nods, no helmet. We eventually evolved into that, but we were straight AK-47s and flip-flops.
Oh man!
Our guys didn't even have uniforms. They're rolling around in whatever we can get them. I actually exploited a program that was a nonprofit that was providing clothes and toiletry items to soldiers overseas, and got this nonprofit to send me helicopters full of equipment to be able to outfit my Afghans with just clothes, with just toothbrushes, because they didn't have it, and we weren't paying for it, so they needed stuff. It's so funny seeing these dudes running around with Harley Davidson shirts and flannel jackets and USA ball caps, but we had to do what we had to do.
Are there any Fieldcraft Survival cats over there now?
I hope so, man.
There better fucking
I've
be.
seen them. They're on
be.
SF guys, but
Right on. What would you say one of your first lessons learned after your first combat deployment, maybe your first engagement, maybe his first base defense? I don't know. What was the first thing that you realized? Holy shit, we need to make some changes, or I mean,
yeah.
the first major lesson learned.
I had a major one. I mean, I almost had look, as an 18 Bravo, I was in charge of the base defense plan. I made it, I wrote it, I rehearsed it with the guys, I implemented it, and I would die on that. So it was a huge responsibility, and I fucked it up from the get-go. I had senior guys that had been to war prior to that. When I was in the Q course, they were doing invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan. We had guys on in my own company that were killed the trip prior in Afghanistan. So we were vetted. We had a good detachment. They let me run with a base defense plan, and I did it, and made a lot of mistakes. I mean, I fucked a lot of stuff up. One thing that I distinctly remember was I had a base defense plan to be prepared for an indirect attack that turned into a direct or more complex attack, because that's how you do it, right? You prep the objective, you get everybody's heads down, and then you do a direct assault and get inside the fire base and start killing people from the bad guy's perspective.
Shit, did they fucking get in?
No, they didn't get in for this particular one, but what they were doing was hitting us with 107 rockets. 107 millimeter rockets air stabilize themselves, so they have basically a mechanism to stabilize their trajectory. So they won't go ass over end and just frap into the rocks. They'll stabilize, and it will send it on a trajectory, and you could aim them off of a rock. It got shot, it got aimed, and those things, they have hundreds of meters of kill radius on the back end of those 107 millimeter rockets. And they were hitting our base, like our small little base. There were rockets that were landing in our fire base. We had one that destroyed one of our fueling points. I had an SOP to get my guys out of their bunks, get their kit on, and get on the rooftops to defend against a direct assault. Well, the problem is, and I didn't learn this until the hard way, is you get up on top of a rooftop when a 107 millimeter rocket's coming in, you are putting your guys' lives at risk. And I got to a rooftop with my 18 Charlie. I was engaging the point of origin, which I saw where the rockets were landed, with a 240 Bravo. I couldn't even affect that area. Was thinking about traversing a 120 mortar. And as I was about to get off the roof, a 107 came over me and my Charlie and hit the fuel point and almost killed us. I mean, if we were on the back end of that 107 millimeter rocket, it would have ripped us in half. And they were known for killing people because the shrapnel and everything else is devastating. So the biggest mistake I made was thinking that doctrinally there was a tactic that needed to be implemented. The right answer was to keep my guys inside their bunks, at least for a period of time, and reinforce the positions with armored vehicles, which we had, a couple of GMVs, and then respond that way. Put my Afghans on the wall, have them defend the base, but don't risk putting guys on the rooftop where they could easily be taken out. I mean, obviously 107 is not forgiving, and no matter what situation you're in, you get hit directly in a vehicle, in a building with a 107, it's going to be a bad day. So,
yeah. You finish that deployment, you come home. What's next?
I get back from that deployment, and Iraq was getting bad, and I wanted to go to school, so I went to put my name in the hat to go to SFARTech, which is Special Forces Advanced Target Reconnaissance, Target Acquisition, Interdiction, Exploitation, a whole bunch of words and an acronym that doesn't even look right. It's SFARTech, whatever. People call it SFARTech, and it's our CQB Advanced Schoolhouse for hostage rescue, for direct action, for vehicle interdiction, We learn all that stuff there. It's I believe an 8-week school, maybe 9 weeks, so it's pretty long. And it is the minimum qualification that you need to serve in a commander's and extremist force, which there's one of those per group, which is a reinforced company that's designed to conduct hostage rescue and crisis response across the world.
How much CQB do you have? What's your background in CQB before you show up to that school? What is the basic kind of mold for an SF guy?
Usually at the team level, you learn it's called cephalic. You learn basic CQB. Sometimes it's strong wall. I think at that time it was probably strong wall, real basic CQB. You don't learn points of domination. You don't learn hostage rescue considerations. Maybe a little bit, but there's not a lot of it.
Okay.
So at the basic team level, if you don't have a Sephardic qualified guy, you might not know a lot. You might think you know a lot, but you really don't. And I thought I knew a lot, but I didn't know anything. I showed up and didn't know shit about CQB until I got there. I knew how to shoot. I was a decent shooter with pistol and carbine, but I didn't know much.
After that school, let's fast forward to the next deployment. Did you utilize that a lot, or was it back to what you were doing before?
No, it was, in fact, I was in Charlie Company, 2nd Battalion. The SIF was Bravo Company, 2nd Battalion. One company designated per group, so they were right next door. So I used to see those dudes come in, and they had longer hair, they had cooler uniforms, they had better guns, and I wanted to be in the SIF. At that time, you had to have 2 years team time to even think about going in the SIF. But I had real good rapport with my company sergeant major, and he went next door to take the SIF. So he was my sergeant major. He became the SIF sergeant major, and long story short, I wasn't supposed to go to SIF as a new guy with only a year and some change on the team, but I went to Sephardic and came recommended out of Sephardic, and so they pulled me over. I mean, I wasn't supposed to deploy to Afghanistan for another year. Holy shit. But I went next door, and I was in Iraq a month later. I mean, out of Sephardic, from that trip, I came back, I went straight to Sephardic, which was 2 months. I had 30 days, and I was straight back in Iraq.
So you did a 9-month deployment, come back for roughly 90 days.
Yeah.
2 months of that is
training,
becoming an assaulter at the highest level, and then you redeploy.
Yep. Redeployed to Iraq for a counterterrorism mission, which is all CQB.
Were you married at the time?
At the time, I was married, but I was married young and to be honest.
Came secondary to the mission.
Absolutely secondary to the mission. We barely knew each other. I mean, on the ground, I had a couple months with her. So it was turning and burning. In fact, I had a hasty marriage because I saw some dudes get killed our trip. I was part of Operation Red Wing that trip, and we had a couple other Chinooks that were down. We had guys that we lost in the company. So it was a bad trip. It was a bad year. A lot of Americans were killed that year.
It's a fucking small world, the fact that you were there, I came there right after that, which means we were there at the same time. And as we talked a couple days ago, you met my fucking best friend who just passed away.
Yeah.
It's fucking crazy.
It is crazy.
Small world
it is a small world, man.
But so you did utilize. Sorry, sidetrack there, but so you did utilize that school on that next deployment?
Every operation.
No shit.
I explosively breached every other target every other night. We went out every night, sometimes twice a night, going after bad guys, and it was a real active campaign. It was us and I believe SEAL Team 8, and we did joint ops, where it was like 2 SIF guys and 5 SEALs, and we went out with our indige and conducted counterterrorism missions.
What did you think of working with the SEALs?
My first impression of them weren't great because we had a few interactions with them where I'll never forget. At the time, I was, believe, still in E6. I hadn't made E7 yet, but I had combat rotation behind me, and I was on my second deployment. And had been in training for years, had been in the military and the infantry, and so I had a background. I'll never forget one of the young SEALs being told by one of my guys who was a senior guy. I was the most junior guy in the SIF. A SIF, a Commanders and Extremist Force, is filled with the most senior guys in the group. I think my detachment years later, everybody made Master Sergeant the same time.
Wow.
Like an entire senior team with guys with multiple deployments. I had the least amount of combat. Guys on average had 3 or 4 rotations, and this is early GWAT. He said, hey, maybe you should hang out with these guys because, you know, we could do some cross training and maybe teach you guys some things. And he said, what could your guys possibly teach mine?
You got to be shitting me.
He said that. And I was humbled to the fact that a lot of my own guys were so senior and already legends in the community. Like there was already stories about them. And so I paid attention. And we had a lot of experiences like that with the young SEALs, but a lot of them weren't. I mean, Jeremy Wise, who eventually went to work for the CIA, and he was killed, unfortunately, in a suicide bombing. He was there. He was great. A couple guys that are now in other special missions units were working with me, and they were great. So I didn't have a horrible experience, but it was different. I mean, a young SEAL coming out of training, 21, 22, and even at that time, I was 26 at the time. So it was different, but we got along good. I mean, we didn't have problems with operating with them, and we had a lot of action. We had a lot of fun that rotation.
What is your next assignment? So you're at third group, you go to the SIF. What comes next?
Another rotation in the SIF. I mean, the SIF is a grind.
Mm-hmm.
I did 3 SIF rotations to Iraq back to back. Going to war, coming back, going to war, coming back, going to war, coming back. I eventually moved up into reconnaissance and special operations and became a sniper, went to sniper school, went to free fall school, and started specializing my efforts on the long gun. So between unilateral operations, which is working with task force, the joint task force, I think at the time we were working with Tom DiTomaso, who's a famous Black Hawk Down platoon leader, and then he was a special missions unit commander. We operated under him and under Task Force 16, which is Stanley McChrystal's big, kill capture conglomerate of the best units in the world.
Mm-hmm.
We were part of that effort when we went out and crushed bad guys for years. I mean, it was a good run of killing a whole bunch of bad guys.
Yeah.
So I did that for 3 rotations in a row. Then I did go to selection, just call it West Virginia selection, to assess for use of SOC. I served in U.S. Army Special Operations Command in a couple of positions, which was
For those of you that don't know, use of SOC is an operational unit at the highest level. You're Tier 1 at this point.
Yeah.
And really, once you get there, I mean, you've just become the most elite warfighter in the world.
Yeah.
How do you feel?
Well, I don't know if I was one of the most elite warfighters in the world. I never looked at myself that way.
Everybody else does.
Yeah. I had some good experiences and some bad ones. Look, special operations is a great community to be part of, but it's a community of the most alpha males on the planet. I did have a bad interaction with my time in that organization with a couple characters. It was a personality conflict. And it's the first time in my career that I felt like achy in my chest. I had anxiety where I was like, man, what the fuck is going on here? I don't typically tell that story because of the nature of the organization. But I didn't have a bad run. I recovered from it, but yeah, it was that unit, that organization. All special missions units are operating at the speed of war,
Mm-hmm.
which is a lot different when you have to deal with bureaucracy and bullshit.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like the higher you go in operational units like that, the more fucking dramatic the guys can get.
That's 100% true. The guys that I worked with were amazing. I mean, I worked with a lot of great guys, and I just got my PP spanked. I got in trouble there. Nothing crazy.
Was it just personality conflict?
It was a personality conflict. I mean, I pissed the wrong dude off, and I learned a lot of lessons from it. But I had a good time in that organization. Got to operate, and got to do a lot of cool shit that I never would have done otherwise. And it was a real cool learning opportunity. So much so that I got promoted at such a young age. That I made E8 at the age of 30.
Damn.
I made Master Sergeant at 30, and promoted the last guy on the promotion list in that organization. So I was like a point. They'd promote us in like point whatever, and not in a whole number. So I was like, there's 160 on that list that year. I was 159.7 on the list. And so I made Master Sergeant while I was there, and I had a choice. I can go back and retrain and do the job for the next 10 years, or I could do what a lot of guys do when they make Master Sergeant and become a team sergeant, which for me was the pinnacle of a career in special operations. To be the team daddy, to be the team sergeant was huge. So Sergeant Major Bob Irby, who is a legend in special operations, he's known by everybody. He's got probably more operational time than anybody in Special Forces Command. He heard about me and another guy, I can't mention his name, but he heard about us, and he asked us if we would leave the organization for an opportunity to stand up a new commanders and extremist force from scratch. Meaning there was no commanders and extremist force for the continent of Africa, and he asked us if we would like to stand it up, which meant obviously working with Joint Special Operations Command. We had relationships built, rapport built. We had experience with specifically reconnaissance, special reconnaissance, snipers, free fall operations. So we said yes, and we were given everything we needed to be successful. Unlimited budget. We got to pick, hire, and fire our guys.
Damn.
And it was a huge, amazing opportunity to do that, to start a mission from nothing, where there's nobody in the company, and then build it up from scratch, and we did that.
You've got a hell of a career, man. I mean, holy shit. And then to watch your face when I tell you, or when I ask you, what does it feel like to be one of the most elite war fighters in the fucking world, and to watch your face be taken back like, oh, I don't consider myself to be that.
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, a lot of guys do that. I think it's ingrained into everybody, and I can see how uncomfortable you were when I just fucking said that, but it is the truth. I mean, there are not very many people that get to that level and with that much combat, and I mean, that's fucking impressive, man.
Yeah, thanks, man.
So you leave there, and then what happens?
So I leave and start grinding to build up this unit, hire and fire a couple guys, and build up a skill set for special reconnaissance in the continent of Africa to be able to respond to crisis that potentially happened. And there was no at the time organization that was covering down on Africa, because it used to be third group's responsibility, but because of the war, we had a change in hands and change in responsibility. So we stood it up. It was a grind. We got validated by Special Operations Command, and that was, ironically enough, September 1st of 2012. We got validated, and a week later, or September 11th, Benghazi happens. I had already been notified prior to Benghazi happening that my team and myself was going to be the first guys into Libya to run what's called a 12-weight program, which is a congressionally mandated counterterrorism program to counter Al-Qaeda, which therein lies the Benny, therein lies the point, which is before September 11th, 2012, I had already been identified. We're going to go in there, stand up a counterterrorism force to counter Al-Qaeda. So it's often been said that, hey, there was no threats there. There was threats, there was bombings, there were shootings, there was attacks on the UN, foreign nationals, embassy staff. So I was getting all those intel sit reps before that happened. And then obviously that happened and it changed everything.
Where were you when that happened?
Ironically enough, I was back in a Special Missions Unit's compound doing a crosstalk brief with basically a key leader engagement with the team lead from Team Libya that had been designated, and me and the other guy from my unit, because we were former unit members of that unit. We were there doing a crosstalk. I'll never forget, I went there and met up with the J3, which was at the time a colonel, and he told me last night, this just happened and this is what's going on. And so I stayed an extra few days to assess the situation and to get tied in, because at that point, it was my unit's responsibility to react and respond outside of obviously the primary main effort, that unit that I was in's responsibility of responding to that crisis.
So was Benghazi happening real time when you found out?
Yes. Yeah, it was happening real time. It was still active and it was still happening, and I was watching on ISR things unfolding.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Is this what ultimately led you to separate?
Yeah, so that's exactly right. Long story short, I deployed to Libya soon after that and stood up a 1208 program, and we had all the right things done to go after the guys that were responsible for the killing of the 4 personnel that were killed in Benghazi. You know, Ambassador Stevens, Smith, and then Glenn Doherty and Tyrone Woods. So we went there. I was deployed there for over 6 months. I busted my ass and tried everything I could to kill or capture those guys, with obviously other special operations units that were there, one other special operation unit that was there. And we offered up a full platter. Kill, capture, bilateral mission, unilateral mission, whatever you want, we'll do. And we were told that the political climate wouldn't allow for it, so we're not going to do anything.
Yeah.
And so let's just say I was disgruntled when I came back. I had a lieutenant colonel that I was co-located with that was a reserve officer from AFRICOM, who was a fucking piece of shit, who was drinking every night, getting drunk, who didn't give a fuck about the mission, who was making excuses every single day about not wanting to work, not wanting to do the op. And so when I got back, I said, go fuck yourself.
God,
and I
are
got
you
out.
serious?
Yeah.
You know, I know how fucking tough that can be. I mean, we didn't have pred feed or anything like that, but to watch an event going down, I mean, that's one of the most, when you know you can fucking help, it's one of the most helpless feelings in the fucking world, and I've experienced that as well. We were working with a foreign counterpart and should have been on that fucking op, but we weren't, and their helos went down, and we listened to the entire thing on the fucking radio, and And then we saw them when they got back. And and the event that you had to, stay on the sideline for is, yeah, I could see how you could be that disgruntled. You got out with 18 fucking years in, right?
Yeah, yeah.
2 years to retirement.
Yep, yeah. I got back. I did get recruited by the CIA at the time. They recruited me for a job, and I had finished my college degree, my bachelor's degree, the year prior to that. So that was a prerequisite to become a staffer for them. I came back with the anticipation of doing that job, but the sequester happened, which was a stop loss on all, or a hiring freeze on all jobs. So I wasn't able to do that job, which kind of fucked me up, I was prepared to do that. So I transitioned off active duty and then went into the National Guard component, where I took a team in Texas, a 19th Special Forces group, and was just waiting on the word, waiting on an opportunity.
Let's rewind a little bit here. So you separate from the Army, finish your degree. How long do you go from your last day in the military to CIA?
So the contracting side, 6 months, maybe
That's
more.
it? 6 months?
Yeah, 6 months.
Did you even want to give being a civilian a shot, or you just couldn't wait to get back over? Or?
Well, my anticipation at that time was I only wanted to do one other job, and that was to be a paramilitary operations officer for the CIA.
Okay.
That's it. The first casualty of the war, the global war on terror, was Michael Spann, and he was a former Marine officer and a member of that job and position. So I wanted to do that. I was ready to hang up my life, meaning my personal life and everything else, to just stay at war.
Yeah.
Because that's what I wanted. And I was chasing the rainbow.
A lot of guys,
Yeah. I was there in Libya, seeing those dudes operate, and was like, you know what, man, I want to be part of that. These guys are squared away. They don't seem to be dealing with a whole bunch of bullshit, and that's what I'm going to do. If I can't kill bad guys in special operations, then I'll get out and kill bad guys somewhere else. And that was what my thoughts were at the time.
That's funny how that mindset just goes across the board, because that's one of the reasons I wanted to go. And not a whole lot of people actually know that about you. I'm really in tune with your following on Instagram. I'm really in tune with your YouTube and your 8 social media channels that you have under Fieldcraft, plus your personal. And you never fucking bring that up. Not a whole lot of people know that you jumped over to CIA, and then, which is where we met.
Yeah.
So, and I'm really curious to hear what you have to say. What was your first impression? You go through training, let's breeze through that, but you show up in country, your first deployment with the agency. What's your first impression?
So the reason I did that job is they gave me that job as an interim from my staff position, which would have been paramilitary operations guy. So I did that job thinking it was a temporary thing, thinking it was only going to be a rotation or 2 until I got the call. When I showed up, I realized really fast that all the things that I'd thought about those positions and then the pot of gold at the end of that rainbow didn't exist. And they were dealing with shit just as much as I was. And so I started realizing that the job I was in wasn't that bad. In fact, it was pretty decent. Without getting into too many details, there was an operational relevancy to it, which made me feel good about what I did for a living. Good pay, good experiences, and not a lot of bullshit. I mean, or you kind of change your scale of bullshit when you go there, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I had just came off active duty where I dealt with a lot of bullshit, so it wasn't that bad. And so for the first time, I think I was pretty happy with what I was doing. The operation ops tempo was decent, and the rotation schedule was good.
Were you at a flagpole?
I wasn't.
Oh, you went, okay.
I went straight to Yemen.
Okay.
Yeah.
Where we met.
Where we met, yeah.
So that was your first deployment.
Yeah.
So what was your impression of the guys, of me? What was your impression of me?
You know what's crazy is people ask me that. Obviously, a lot of special operations guys ask me that. The best dudes I've ever met have been in that job. Because I know, because of the vetting process, that they're the best shooters in the world. Mm-hmm. Even better than my standards in special operations.
Yeah.
I mean, I've shot with the best shooters in the world in special operations, and then I get to this job, and I was super impressed by the standards. The shooting qual is the hardest shooting qual in the government. There's no doubt about it, because I've been to the firearms instructor development course at Camp Perry to vet the hardest and most difficult courses. Outside of the U.S. Marshal, Service, the Air Marshal Service, it is the most difficult qual. So having that confidence that these guys are vetted, qualified to be where they're at, and that the myriad of backgrounds and experiences are brought together, I thought it was real cool, man.
Yeah.
I was super impressed. You're always going to have a dude here and there, but for the direct hires that I operated with, the independent contractors, there's nothing bad I could say about any of them. You know, some of them are quirky and weird, just like we all are.
Yeah.
But operations wise, the best I've ever worked with.
Well, that's cool to hear. Did you find it, one of the biggest struggles that I had working there was the integration of tactics, all because you're working with all the best units from all special operations. Everybody has their way of doing shit. Everybody thinks their way is the best. Some guys, like myself, can shut the fuck up and learn new ways and realize, hey, you know, this is what we have to do, and we have to be uniform if we're going to work together. And then there's, you know, the other crowd that they can't let go of, you know, their specific or their unit-specific tactics. Where did you fall in that spectrum?
I try to strike a good balance. I did have recent GWAT experience and tactics, and you know how that is. The further displaced you get from the war, there's a whole bunch of different tactics that change. Mm-hmm. So I was heard, you know, when I brought up things, but I also try to be very careful about, one, being a new guy, but two, understanding that as long as the tactics worked, there could be a different way to skin the cat. I mean, there were things that I didn't necessarily agree with, but there are going to be different viewpoints and tactics. But if it works and doesn't violate security, I'm okay with that. So I had a better, easier time, and like I said, I needed that job.
Yeah.
I was transitioning, you know, obviously off of active duty. I needed that job, and I needed to be in a good place in that position. I had just made Sergeant Major in 19th Special Forces Group. So going back home, I had responsibilities. And so I just couldn't get caught up in any bullshit. There was drama like there is anywhere else. Mm-hmm. I just go to my room.
Yeah, you were a room hobbit.
Yeah, stay in my room.
You did a lot of squats that trip. I literally saw your butt rising.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Week after week.
2 to 4 hours of squats a day. I had a nice ass after.
You
after
did.
That.
I was real nice one.
Man,
but
so nice.
I mean, that's cool though, because I mean, honestly, most guys in that outfit don't have near the fucking experience that you brought to the table. I mean, we just in an hour went over your, you know, breezed through your military career, and I mean, holy shit, dude. That's a lot of fucking trigger time. That's a lot of deployments, and that's a that's a shit ton of experience. I mean, you named all the major schools. I think you left out JTAC, which we had talked about earlier.
Yeah.
I mean, it's got to be hard to bite your tongue with certain things. And anyways, that.
Yeah.
How long were you over there at the agency?
I did a total of 7 trips, 6.5, because my last trip wasn't a full trip.
Okay.
So I think before we met, I did maybe one rotation before that. Maybe.
It's hard to piece together.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So I did a total of 6.5, and my last trip was early 2016. And again, I don't advertise that experience, but I was deploying back into war zones between my trips with the CIA. So I was going downrange, coming back, going straight on a deployment with 19th Group. And
Holy shit.
And coming right back in. And so it became redundant and it became pretty overwhelming to get anything accomplished in civilian life.
All right, Mike. So we covered all of your operational career up to this point, and I want to kind of wrap that up because I'd like to move along with Fieldcraft and transitioning and what you're up to now. But before we do, I want to take a call. And
you take calls on your podcast? That's cool.
I take calls. So I met this kid maybe 3 years ago, and he was a fucking soup sandwich. Showed up to one of my training courses, had the fucking Delta beard, had all the fucking tactical shit, didn't know how to use any of it, fucking completely unsure of himself, just living in a total fantasy land. And he started training with me more and more and more, and became really interested in actually doing the fucking job instead of looking the part. And I know you get blown up on the IG, and so do I, with DMs all the time of people who want to do it. Well, this fucking guy actually is doing it. He went and signed up, and he's waiting for his selection date, and I'm super fucking proud of him. I nicknamed him Keebler. Like
Keebler the elf?
Yeah, like Keebler the elf. Because he used to have this stupid fucking beard. But
those cookies are delicious too. They're so good.
I know, right?
So good.
So I'm going to give him a call. He's got a question for you about going through selection, I think, and something with the National Guard. So here we go.
What's up, brother?
Keebler, you son of a bitch.
He in a factory, a steel pot factory?
You're in my podcast, and I got Mike Glover here. I know you got a question for him.
I do. How's it going, guys?
Good, man.
Cool. You want me to just ask the question that I sent you the text about?
You don't have that stupid fucking beard still, do you?
No, just a mustache right now.
Jesus.
Yeah, I gotta grow what I can, right?
Right on. Well, hey, let's hear your question.
All right. So I have a question that a bunch of the National Guard SF students have. One that I have for myself as well. People are just interested hearing, what the life is like inside of like 19th and 20th Group as far as contract work goes, working for the GRS while being in National Guard SF. If you have any information on that.
It just so happens I do.
It looks like you're in luck, Keebler.
I figured Mike Glover might be the right man to ask.
Yeah, so I obviously did that for a living, where I was doing contracting and then coming back and operating in that 19th Group. I was in Charlie 119, and I had a good sergeant major. I had a good company commander, but I was also a team sergeant in that company before I made sergeant major. So the time period in which I was a team sergeant, I had stood up a team from scratch. We didn't have a detachment when I rolled in there. I got to handpick some guys and put them on my detachment, and found that, operating overseas, no matter what your position was commonplace in those Guard units. I mean, you're going to have a lot of guys that contract. Hell, half the guys that work in 19th Group more than likely contract. Now, with that being said, depending on who your client is or who you contract for is going to determine whether or not it's okay. Most of the time, I would say 99% of the time, it's fine. There's no issues with it because, again, you're not doing anything during the year besides the 1 week in a month. And, you know, as long as you could try to make the 2 weeks a year, that's fine. A good company in Special Forces will work with you via the B Team Operations Sergeant. So if the B Team Ops guy is switched on, which mine was, he's super squared away, he facilitated guys who missed their 2 weeks a year annual training. And that was okay. He just made up for it by sending them to school, by making them do details at the schoolhouse or at the unit. And so it's not an issue. I mean, it's just what happens. I think a lot of people don't understand this about the guard component of SF. It's a secret, and it's one of the best kept secrets in special operations. And I'll just leave it at that. It's a great organization to work for. I had a good time.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it definitely does. That's definitely helpful because over here, like even the guard liaison, they don't really have any information on that. They just kind of try to tell the guys to just, once you get to your group, be the guard bum, just go to as many schools as possible and try to hop onto other ODA's deployments. So I just wanted to hear from a contract perspective of it.
Yeah,
Appreciate the info.
Yeah, if you're a guard guy and you go to SODIC, if you go to sniper school, for example, that counts as all your time because you're activated, obviously. So just going to a school or going to some training on your off time, I was very proactive. When I came back for a contract trip, I would show up and be on the clock and hanging out, fixing stuff in the team room, training guys that showed up new. So there's always something that you could do to make up for the time on the back end. And at the end of the day, it's not that big of a deal. If you have a federal government position or job, contractor or not, you're pretty secure in your position. The guard can't really fuck with you.
That's good to hear.
All right, Keebler, what are you doing today? Why the fuck aren't you at work?
Why aren't you rucking right now?
I actually am at work. I'm outside standing security for the 18 Bravo compound, killing the game.
Hell yeah. I remember that compound. That's solid.
Yeah.
It's changed a bit since I've been there.
Exactly the same.
Yeah.
All right, Keebs. Good
All
luck
right,
to you. Talk to you soon. If you don't make it, don't ever fucking call me again. I'm just kidding.
But seriously.
No, I'm not.
Don't worry. I'm gonna make it. I've had some cool mentors.
All right.
All right, man.
Later.
We'll talk soon. All right, bye.
Smart question.
So that was Keebler.
Yeah, that's a good question, man.
So we're out of the combat stuff. We're out of the military and the operational units. You're done with your last CIA deployment. And now it's time to start transitioning, which everyone I know in special operations dreads the transition. How was yours?
Oh, man. It was bad. It wasn't good. I mean, I made a lot of mistakes. I had a hard time.
Could you sleep?
Nope. No sleep. Anxiety. Waking up all the time in the middle of the night, looking out the windows, staring off in the sky, in tears, not really understanding what the fuck's going on with me. Trying to get through the VA process and get some help, which was failing. Not having a job and just trying to grind it on my own. Failed relationships. I mean, the list goes on. It was a fucked up experience, yeah.
It's always, I've never heard of one that went smoothly.
Yeah, if somebody said, yeah, my transition was just super easy and it was no problem, I'd be super suspect of that person.
Yeah. Is there one thing that kind of gave you, I mean, I don't really know how dark it got. We did have a conversation and you had told me, I had kind of shared my experience with you on when I tried to commit suicide, and then you had a similar experience.
Yeah, I had a night where, I was prescribed Ambien, I was drinking alcohol, and I had a pistol in my hand. And, the best way described to me, my own thoughts was the fact that, in our career fields, our job is to be an asset to our team, to our unit, to our country, and we take out liabilities. We kill bad guys that don't deserve to be on the planet, and that's what we do. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like, you're a trained killer. That's what you do in special operations. Mm-hmm. If you don't understand that, you shouldn't be attempting to be in special operations or be in it. And so we're used to taking out bad guys. Mm-hmm. And I looked at myself at that point in my life as a bad guy. I had made some really bad personal decisions that affected my relationships to those closest to me. I had, isolated myself. I was an active duty master sergeant at the tip of the spear, having a decent family life, and now I was sleeping on an air mattress in a fucking apartment by myself. Mm-hmm. I had spent that time period, nobody wanted to be around me, including my own family. I spent all of Christmas and all of New Year's by myself inside this apartment, drinking, and I was at a loss, man. I didn't have anybody.
Completely isolated.
Completely isolated.
No phone calls.
Nobody even wanted to be close to me.
Jeez.
Nobody reached out to me. I was completely by myself.
Had they reached out to you, do you think you were even prepared to take any assistance?
Probably not. No, probably not.
We find most guys see that as a weakness.
Yeah.
Which is fucking sad, but...
Yeah, I fell asleep, drunk, with a pistol in my hand and a bottle of wine in another hand on the floor of my shitty apartment in Texas.
Any idea what pulled you through that?
To be honest, not really. I don't know. I think I just got through it because I didn't have the courage to kill myself. It had nothing to do with empathy or compassion for others. I didn't kill myself because I felt for other people and how they would live without me kind of shit. I didn't want to be alive. But I just didn't have the fucking balls to do it. So I didn't. And you know what did help me is it was a struggle. I mean, to breathe. I was taking one breath at a time just to get through the moment. And I was researching all the stuff on depression and anxiety. And I read something that said that yoga helped a lot. There was a yoga studio a mile down the road that did 90-minute hot yoga. And I was like, fuck it, you know what? What else do I have to lose? I've lost everything. Let me just try. And so I went to a yoga class, and it did help me. Like, I did yoga. I sweated my ass off and walked away from that experience going, man, this actually helped me a little bit.
No shit.
And just in increments, small increments, one day at a time, I started to pull myself out of it. I still had epic failed relationships. I want to blame my crazy ass ex-girlfriends for a lot of stuff, and they were crazy in a lot of ways.
Most of them are.
Most of them are, especially the hotter ones. But it was me. I was fucked up, man.
Yeah.
I mean, things that, civilians aren't prepared with the capacity to even understand what's happening to them when you lose your shit, or your temper flares, or you punch a hole through a wall, or you just do stupid shit and say stupid shit. That there's no context for them. So it all comes across as crazy. There's no empathy. I never got empathy from my ex-girlfriend. She never said, I'm so sorry that you had to go through this, because she didn't even understand it.
Yeah.
So I want to point the finger and be like, fuck you for not having empathy for me, but fuck me for just being a dick.
Yeah.
But again, it's not our fault in a way. I mean, I think we should take personal responsibility for things that we do wrong, but there's no mechanism or even understanding, back then at least, of what the fuck's happening to this guy.
Yeah.
He's an elite special operations guy. There was everything going for him, and he's falling apart. And I simply just started to realize that, like, when you take a dog of war and you let him off the leash and he bites and he attacks and he has one condition, which is operating at the speed of war, then when you come home, you can't expect him to sit on your fucking lap and be a house dog. So there is a new reconditioning that needs to take place, and it's a process. People who don't understand as spouses that there is a process, it's a failed expectation. You'll fucking lose every time. And that process might not ever go away.
Yeah.
You know, I hate the spouses that make themselves feel like victims because of what their veterans going through. Everybody goes through trauma in some form or fashion, but I don't want that to define who I am at my core, because I know I'm a good man at my core, but I know I've made a lot of poor decisions based on the trauma that I've experienced.
Yeah.
And so it's a daily fucking effort and campaign just to make sure that I stay squared away.
I think a big struggle too is, there's a lot of things going on during, especially at the beginning of a transition. And I think one of the first things that sets in for guys, I know one of the first things that set in for me was, it's when you realize you're just a fucking human. You know, I mean, it's...
You're not a god anymore.
When you're at the SEAL team, when you're at, the SF team, when you're at the agency, I mean, you have this sense of like who you are, and you're unstoppable, and all the shit that you've been through, and all the operations you've gone on, the gunfights, everything. You're at the pinnacle of it all. And then when you come out, you realize you're just as fucking human as every other motherfucker walking around this earth. And that is very humbling. Did you feel that?
Absolutely. I mean, one, society's not prepared for us.
No.
They don't know how to deal with us. Just like they didn't with MACV-SOG guys in Vietnam, after Vietnam, or post even World War II. A lot of men that come back from special operations and have these experiences can't replicate that in civilian life. So there is a complex where we think we're gods because we're identified as operator, we're identified as sniper, we're identified as all these high-speed things that are relevant in our communities, but irrelevant in society. You want to assimilate in civil society, no one gives a fuck that you're a sniper.
No.
In fact, in civil society, you're a liability because you're fucking crazy. Or, oh, sorry you went to war, man, that must have been a tragic thing. And so they're definitely not prepared, and I don't think we are taught that to re-assimilate, we have to re-identify ourselves and redefine purpose. Purpose for me in the military was killing bad guys. That's the only drive and purpose that I had. I woke up every morning, even as a leader in special operations. If I don't kill bad guys, I'm a failure. Whether that's kinetic, proxy, directly, killing bad guys was my job.
Yeah.
How does that translate into the civilian sector? You know, not very well.
It doesn't.
Yeah, it doesn't. Not very well.
But so something pulled you through all this. But before we get to that, I have another question that I want to ask you. Would you want, after everything you've been through, I know you wouldn't have changed a thing, so I'm not going to ask you that, but you do realize now the toll that it took on your personal life and you as a person. What would you do if your son told you he wanted to become a Green Beret? Would you be for it?
I would support him, but I would try to convince him otherwise. I don't think... I had expectations of how it was going to be, and then I experienced it. And the toll that it's taking long term, I would never take that back for myself because I earned that. Good, bad, or indifferent, I earned it. But looking at the full process and journey and the toll it takes, I wouldn't want to do that to his family. I wouldn't want to do that to his loved ones, his family, his friends, to his mom, I would try to convince him otherwise, because one, some people think it's their only option, but two, there's nobility in it. Some people think that selfless service and sacrifice is the noble cause, and that's okay. I get that. I get selfless sacrifice, but there's so many other things that are broader where you could affect change and have a greater impact outside of the military. I didn't realize that until recently, until doing what I'm doing now. And I realized that I probably couldn't do what I do now. If you weren't a SEAL and I wasn't a Green Beret, nobody give a fuck.
Mm-mm.
But because we are, it's set a foundation. So I don't know, I'm torn with that, but more than likely not.
It's a tough call.
I want my kids coding at the age of 5. I want them to be entrepreneurs by the age of 10. Because I know that entrepreneurship, because I grew up in it, entrepreneurship is the only single way to a means of controlling your own destiny, literally.
Yeah.
Not figuratively. Not like, I got this. No, you got a boss. You don't got shit.
Interesting. I think most guys are the same. You know, they. I think they would say the same thing. I would. And the shitty thing is everyone I know in that community is stubborn as a son of a bitch, and nobody is gonna fucking talk them out of it. But I just was curious, you know.
I have an expectation my son will go tell me to fuck myself.
Good.
And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't fight him on it, is what I mean.
Yeah.
I wouldn't. There is no contingencies for me, and there's no resentment for me. You do what you got to do, son. Do you. But let me give you the advice, and you could take the advice, or you could flush it down the shitter.
Or the real, you know, I mean, when I talk to the younger generation that's coming up and they want to do that, I make sure they do realize as much as possible what the other side looks like. Mm-hmm. It's not all the fucking glory that everybody thinks.
It's not like Hollywood depicts.
Yeah, not at all. But all right, enough about that. So Fieldcraft Survival. You guys fucking do all kinds of stuff. I've seen Fieldcraft talk about the keto diet. I've seen him talk about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, grappling, tactics, shooting, obviously survival, overland mobility. Am I missing anything here?
There's probably 10 other things I don't know.
But I mean, it's impressive that you're in all these different spaces and how many people you're impacting. What was the first space that you entered in Fieldcraft, and why did you do that?
It was survival, modern survival as I define it, which is being prepared for a modern world. You know, bushcraft is really interesting and really cool, but it's the E in the PACE plan of contingencies. It's the emergency. If you're running, you know, I always tell people, if you're rubbing sticks together naked in the woods, you fuck some stuff up. You've taken 10 steps prior to that and fucked it up. So in modern survival, we focus on the core principles of modern survival. And in the beginning, I've been to every SEER school in the military. I've been to peacetime detention. I've been to covert comms. I've been to restraint defeat. I've been to high risk, 2 versions of high risk. I've been to the agency's SEER school. So I have a good understanding of the doctrine and then the training methodology behind it, and figured I would make a survival kit, that allows you to survive for 72 hours, because that's the period of time in which the average catastrophe unfolds, whether that's being displaced from an urban to a rural environment, getting out of a bad natural catastrophe, surviving in a period of time, that's usually around 72 hours. So I made a survival kit starting out, and then we started doing modern survival training courses that focused on the psychology.
No shit.
Instead of focused on just the skill set. Psychology is so much more important to understand, and understanding how it works, meaning how resiliency works, how survival works. And so I started studying case studies on why people live and why people die, and formulated a training plan based off of that, and then stood up Fieldcraft Survival under that methodology.
We didn't talk for after that deployment in Yemen. We didn't keep in touch at all. We didn't really get close that deployment or anything. And then I'm going through my transition, and I'm watching Fox News, and all of a sudden I see fucking Mike Glover pop up on Fox News, and I didn't even know your real name at that point. And I was like, holy shit, I know this fucking guy. And I looked you up, and I saw Fieldcraft, and I saw your personal IG, and I was like, holy shit. And then I started following you more and more, and one of the things that I really like about what you guys are doing in the tactical space is you just fucking have this way of keeping it real, and you keep the tough guy bullshit attitude out of it, which makes for the perfect learning environment. But you keep everything very realistic. You're not out there fucking dancing around like an idiot. You're focused on shit that works, and that can be kind of tricky in this space because everybody's looking for the circus, the shit that looks cool. And you've created a successful training business without ever getting involved in that shit. How did you do that?
What it is it's kind of what I've done my entire life, where I'm not worried about popularity. I don't give a fuck about flashy shit. I just don't care. I've never been that way. I grew up poor, and I didn't have a desire to pretend like I was rich. So I didn't look at what most kids look at on social media, which is popularity.
Mm-hmm.
They look at likes, for example. Likes is not a metric to success. It's a metric to popularity. They're two different distinct things. I'd rather have 100 likes on a post from 100 people who are willing to train and read my content and take things seriously in survival and preparedness than have 25,000 likes of a bunch of nerds just geeking the fuck out over a picture of something that looks tactical.
Yeah.
I never give a fuck about that. And I also don't give a fuck about teaching people things that are unrealistic. I know statistically that cardiovascular disease and cancer kill more people than anything on the planet. So yeah, you're less likely to be in a gunfight. So maybe instead of focusing on running and gunning unrealistically on a flat range shooting still and paper, I'll instead focus on the basic skill sets of gun handling skills and safety and the fundamentals of marksmanship. Because I want to make sure the guy or gal who leaves my course could draw their pistol safely and engage a threat realistically, than fucking run around with a pro mask on looking like a fucking operator when you've never operated a day in your life. Like I'm not a fan of that.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of it because at the truth and core of it, we all have choices and options. And I get the customer's going to go where they want to go. But like I said, I have my tribe and people who follow us and people who buy shit and train shit. I'm good with that. I'm not interested in being the Walmart tactician. Not interested at all.
I mean, that's cool because you're also, at the same time, you're looking for a particular customer, client, student, whatever you want to call it, just by saying that. And I think that drives a lot of the I call them the end of the world fantasy people to the other. They don't want to do the fundamentals. A lot of them, they just want to come out there and get a fucking picture of them wearing a bunch of shit that they don't know how to use. And they don't want to put the time and the effort in to actually become efficient with their equipment. And how long did it take you to kind of like figure that out? When you jump into the tactical space, you get all kinds of you get all kinds of people that want to train. You got the guy that just wants to protect his family and church. You got all the way to the opposite, who's secretly fantasizing that he's going to be shooting zombies on his fucking rooftop. How long did it take you to figure out what all the different profiles that want training in this space?
Well, I knew the way I would attract the right people was by doing what we do, which is being real, which is having realistic expectations of training, and not trying to build a business off of a gimmick. Everybody nowadays come to the table in a business plan with a gimmick, and my mom raised me in business to understand that hard work, discipline, and your ethic is what's going to get you to the top. And maybe that's one slow step at a time, but that scales more optimal for me because it doesn't deviate from my values. So just putting out that would attract the right people, and it has thus far. We've grown slowly over the last few years, but I'm okay with that, man. I'm okay with slow growth.
Yeah.
A lot of these kids are living in fantasy world because they want to be somebody. I feel sorry for them. They want to be something significant, and so they use their social media to virtue signal to the world that there's something they're not. It's called emulation. It's what emulators do. It's what we did, just in a different way. I mean, I used to read Mac V. Sog books, sniper books from John Plaster, Carlos Hathcock, all those guys. And when I read those books, I went in the woods and I pretended. But I did that when I was a kid, not a fucking adult. And these guys are fucking grown-ass men LARPing on social media without the deliberate plan to do something significant.
Yeah.
I always tell these kids who ask for advice, I'm okay with giving you advice. I'll give you free advice all day as long as it means something at the end of the day, not just you perpetuating a feeling. Because you tell your friends at the bar that you're trying out for special operations, and then 2 years later you're still sitting on your ass in your cubicle.
Your authenticity really comes through on your lives and everything else, and I think a lot of people are really, really drawn to that, especially nowadays more than ever with all the phony shit on social media. And I mean, all of your branches of Fieldcraft just seem to be growing very steadily. What's next?
Next for us is partnerships with good companies that represent preparedness and survival. I mean, we all have different genres, you know, whether it's 511 Tactical or BCM. People have their narrow fields of fire, but we want to partner with good businesses and develop better equipment that helps people survive. There's a whole bunch of deficiencies in the game because a lot of companies are focused on the wrong priorities, in my opinion.
I agree with you
So
on that.
we're going to try our best to fix those, and then continue doing media, man. I love the media thing like you do. I mean, this being your first podcast, I love podcasts because it gives opportunity to hear a long form version of somebody's experiences instead of clickbait. And so I'm more interested in doing versions of that instead of doing shorter versions of clickbait. I do have a plan to write a book. I've written 4 chapters of it. It's probably one of the hardest things I've done technically. Looking for a publisher or an agent to get that knocked out because I realize I'm a good creative writer, but in 300-word increments on Instagram, not in a 250-page book on mindset or survival. So yeah, man, we're continuing to grind. We got mobility coming out. Overlandtraining.com is a domain that I've licensed from Overland Journal and Expedition Portal, who are the OGs and bosses in Overland. So if you guys want to do overland training with us, overlandtraining.com, and we got a whole bunch of shit going on. We're training all over the United States. I'll be in Texas in January. My guys I'll be in California in January. I'm all over the place, man. It's a grind that I'm in love with. It's something that I'm passionate about, and I've been in it for 4 years, and it's just something that I'm prepared to maintain. I'm in it for the marathon, the 50K or the 100K. I'm not in this for fucking a wind sprint.
I heard you say on another podcast that you never made it about money. And I have not heard very many people in business say that. And I always say that too, which is another one of the similarities that when you came up here. Do you think that really helped you with your business by not making it about money and making it about growing?
Yeah, 100%. We all have our incentives, and it really shapes your behavior and your pattern of life. If money, I love these people who come out and say, money is not important to me. And they fly in G6s, they buy Lambos and show the world they have Ferraris and materialistic shit. I don't fucking care about any of that. I literally don't. I have a couple sentimental things that are more likely rocks and war memorabilia, but that could burn to the ground. I care more about people.
Yeah.
And it's not a pitch. I've always been that way. I've always been in the military willing to sacrifice my time, my efforts, and potentially my life for people. So coming out of the military, that didn't change for me. I didn't, some people I've seen this happen. It's directly affected me, where motherfuckers come out and they get a little taste of what they think is popularity, and it changes who the fuck they are.
Yeah.
That never interested me because I never cared about popularity. I played high school football. I was a popular kid in school, but I didn't give a fuck. And so I didn't wear my ego on my shoulder. So when I make it about people, it changes the priorities, whereby the bottom line for me isn't the profit margin. The bottom line is taking care of people. And by default, and this isn't, you could look at it in books as a marketing tactic or a business tactic, but it has to be genuine. Mm-hmm. And so when I make it about people, people take care of our company. People buy our swag, they attend our training because they believe in the mission, because I've made it about the mission and not about a bottom line in marketing. I see good companies doing great things and then charging people, fuck man, $500 for a bag. Like, what? Like, what are you even doing? I remember I dropped one of my mobility bags and I sold it for $200. It cost me $67.50 to make. That margin is low in textiles. It's low. After all the shipping, receiving, all the labor, the overhead in the building, electricity, etc., you're looking at an additional bag, a 50% profit margin. Dude, that's no money to be made. Yeah. The people bitched about it. And people complained. So I lowered the price. I even had that thing for $99 just because I knew I wanted to make people happy. Now that's my downfall too.
Yeah.
My downfall is I'm not always looking at the numbers. When in business you should be. You should be looking at the numbers. You should be paying attention to the numbers. But incentive-wise, what should drive your behavior and what should drive your business should be for the right reasons, and that for me is people.
In Fieldcraft, you guys, it seems like you guys do a lot of prepping and are masters of it. And I don't know about you, but a lot of the clients that I've had think that there might be something they need to prepare for. So I don't know about Fieldcraft, but I have a feeling our clientele are very similar because we're both realists, and I would say the majority of my clients, not all of them, but the majority of them think that they need to be prepared for something. And you guys are big in the prepping world as well. They think something might happen, not necessarily the end of the world, but they just want to be ready in case of a natural disaster, an EFP. There's 1,000 different scenarios. What would you say for somebody that's completely green? They don't know how to shoot, they don't own a gun, they don't have food storage, anything. What would you say the number one priority would be? Where do they start?
The number one priority for me is personal defense, because the first principle of patrolling is security, and if you can't secure yourself, you can't secure your family, you can't defend your life, you can't defend your family's life. So I would say it starts with a personal decision to buy a firearm, learn how to utilize a firearm, and carry that firearm daily.
What firearm would you suggest starting with, pistol or rifle?
I think universally, I carry different guns for different reasons, but universally a Glock 19 is probably the staple concealed carry pistol. In contracting, we carry Glock 17s typically, but Glock 19s is the right frame size for most. It's the right size frame for concealment. It has the most accessories per gun in the industry. It's a good platform. It's reasonably priced, and I've used a Glock 19 when the military got them in special operations, and I've seen them throughout my military career, and I've never seen one fail. So a single action only Glock 19 is the start point.
I would definitely agree with that. It's like the Toyota Corolla of handguns.
Yeah, absolutely.
They just never fucking die.
Yeah, 100%.
But, and then, so next would be, so you would say pistol, and then move on to rifle?
No, the next priority for me is med.
Med?
Med, absolutely. 30,000 people a year die in vehicle accidents. I wonder how many of those could have been prevented. 400 idiots a year fall out of their tree stands and hunting and break their legs and do dumb shit. So we're prone to accidents. We're prone to trauma. And I've treated trauma in real life. I've saved people's lives with tourniquets. Tourniquet, which is a $29.99 piece of equipment from North American Rescue, which we sell on our website at fieldcraftsurvival.com, is the number one piece of equipment that in med that you need to carry. Stopping an extremity wound, a traumatic bleed from a femoral or brachial artery is life-saving. If you don't do that, you simply just go to sleep and die.
Are you guys teaching meds?
We absolutely do, yeah. We teach TCCC, Tactical Combat Casualty Care, which we were required by our contract to train. We teach a course, certified TCCC course through NAEMT, the certification on tactical med training, trauma training. I just taught a CPR lifesaver course at my Tribe Expo recently. So we frequently teach med, and I expect that if in contracting in austere environments we're required to carry a tourniquet based on our own understanding of what we could run into, that a civilian should do the same. Whether that's inside your waistband, because we do sell an inside the waistband tourniquet holder, or that's inside of a bag or inside your vehicle, somewhere within arm's reach, where if you're experiencing trauma, you could save your life.
Interesting. So number 3, what would the number 3 thing be? We got pistol, we got med.
If we're talking equipment-specific things that you need to carry, the next piece of equipment would be the way in which you carry it, which would be the bag in which you carry. A lot of people don't think about it, but the extension of your capability of what you can carry on your person is limited. Mm-hmm. You can only fit so much shit in your pockets and your pants. And if you have a bag, meaning an everyday carry bag, that might be your purse, your MERS, your European man satchel. It sets you up for an extended capacity. That's how we look at vehicles. If I have a med kit in my back pocket, that's a minimalist, low vis med kit. Well, I want my fucking car to be an ambulance. I want there to be enough med equipment to treat my family, myself, and then you upgrade that to your house as well. I want a damn hospital at my house. So having the ability to carry all their stuff is super important. And in that bag, I would definitely include a survival kit, a modern survival kit that has the staples of survival, including the ability to contain water, purify water, start a fire, signal, communicate potentially, SAT, Iridium, VHF, UHF, the list goes on.
Gummy bears.
Gummy bears at you know, that are fat-free, that have lots of carbs, lots of sugars, lots of calories. They're survival bears. That's what we call them.
They're survival bears.
Yeah.
Well, Mike, I know you got a flight to catch, so I'm going to wrap this up, but I just want to say, man, I had a great fucking time. You came up, and I didn't know how this was going to go. We hadn't seen each other in 6-7 years, and I mean, I think we think very parallel on a lot of things, and it was a great time. We made some great content. I can't thank you enough for coming up here, and it's been awesome watching you grow and watching Fieldcraft grow, and I can't wait to see what comes in the years ahead. So thank you for coming out.
Thanks for having me, man. I'm looking forward to hearing your podcast and seeing what you guys have in the future. I mean, you're one of 3 YouTube channels that I watch. The other 2 are mushroom YouTube channels, foraging for mushrooms.
You do love some mushrooms.
I love them. And so, yeah, man, I appreciate you guys having me out and, you know, open your doors to me. And it's rare for me, like you, to get out. And when I do go out, it's only for specific reasons or specific people. And you guys are some really good people doing some really good stuff, and I look forward to doing more with you.
Thank you. Yeah, I hope we can do this again sometime. Real quick, before we hang this up, where can we find you?
We're all over social media, obviously. Fieldcraft Survival Fit, Fieldcraft Mobility, Fieldcraft Survival, Mike.A.Glover on my personal, fieldcraftsurvival.com, overlandtraining.com. If you need to find us, just Google us. You'll find us. We have a podcast on iTunes called the Fieldcraft Survival Podcast, and we also have a podcast called the Modern Mindset 365 Podcast, which is all about mindset. So yeah, definitely hit us up and look us up.
You heard it. Look them up. I think you should open another profile called Magic Mike, but
Magic Mike.
But
I like that.
Yeah, that's a good one. But all right, thanks again, man, and we'll see you guys soon. We got to jet to the airport.
Cool. Thanks, guys.